Hey guys, what's going on? Paul here. Welcome back to another Cardano video. And this one, we're going to dive into Bitcoin OS and what it's all about, what it can potentially bring to Cardano, making Cardano a DeFi layer for Bitcoin. I know people say it'll be a layer 2. I see it more as a DeFi layer or offering some DeFi functionality to Bitcoin. But Yago, it's very good to have you here today. I appreciate your time. It's been a bit of a crazy 24 hours. You've been the talk of Cardano for a while now, for slightly different in the last 24 hours. We'll get to that later on. But welcome. Do you want to give an introduction to yourself first?
Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me. I'm a long-time Bitcoiner. I got into Bitcoin because I'm interested in building the technologies of freedom, building the technologies of self-ownership. And I think I very often sort of disagree with almost everyone. I'm a little bit of a disagreeable person. And like one of my big disagreements is like I disagree with Bitcoiners that we should reject as shitcoins everything that's happening in the crypto world. I think there's a huge amount of innovation happening in the crypto world. I think there's a huge amount of new users who come through the wider crypto world. And I also think that there's something really important about the fact that Bitcoin works because of incentives. And tokens not only give us new ways to interact with value, but they also create new incentives for innovation. And that's something that's been lacking on Bitcoin. So my goal is to sort of drag Bitcoin kicking and screaming towards crypto, and drag crypto kicking and screaming if necessary towards Bitcoin, dissolve sort of the tribalism and the barriers between these different communities and chains, and create a comprehensive, unified, and therefore much more robust, much more powerful, much more fast growing ownership economy.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people will never look at anything but Bitcoin, or they'll go on a journey and they'll go to the end of what Bitcoin can do and then eventually look to see what else is out there. But I can understand why people get locked in when you look at some of the absolute shit that goes on in crypto in general and what goes on out there in terms of extraction of value. And you look at pump fun and different things that have been going on this week with it. I can see why that turns people off looking outside, but there is so much more you can do and so much more with blockchain in general. And that's what I think you guys are trying to really unlock for Bitcoin, that they can still have the security on Bitcoin, which is what I'd say a lot of people like to have over there, the stability of it. But can you give the high level overview of what Bitcoin OS is? I've seen it referenced as a bridge. I think from my understanding, it's a lot more than just a simple bridge bringing assets from one chain to another.
Yeah, so the name kind of does explain it, right? Bitcoin OS, Bitcoin operating system. And the idea is that we now have the ability to take any kind of compute, and that could mean computing many, many thousands of transactions and sort of compiling them down into a ZK proof and writing them to Bitcoin so that you get scalability. Or it could be taking like sophisticated compute, DeFi, or I don't know, anything, AI, right? Folding that down into a ZK proof, writing that to Bitcoin, and then allowing Bitcoin to execute transactions on the basis of that compute. And so what that does is it turns Bitcoin into a programmable ledger where any kind of computation can be utilized on Bitcoin. And there's a whole bunch of things that you can build with this. You can potentially integrate privacy. So, there's one of the projects that is being built in the Cardano ecosystem is Midnight, right? If we can integrate Midnight into Bitcoin, you can get privacy for Bitcoin transactions. We can do programmable tokens on Bitcoin. So you could have real world assets on Bitcoin, or you could have meme coins on Bitcoin, or you could have Bitcoin backed stable coins on Bitcoin. And Bitcoin can become like a global ledger, a global settlement system. And you can have trustless bridging, because you can sort of give Bitcoin eyes and ears, eyes and a brain to what is happening in a different chain, for example, Cardano. And if it can see what is happening, and what do I mean by see? It means like it can receive provable data from that chain. It can execute transactions on Bitcoin on the basis of a smart contract that was written on Cardano. So what is like an operating system? Ultimately, what an operating system is it's a thing that allows an application to talk to the CPU. And in the case of Bitcoin, the CPU is sort of like the Bitcoin proof of work. And it also allows these different applications to talk to each other. So it creates a single system. So on your phone, like iOS is your operating system. Uber talks to the phone through iOS, but also it talks to Google Maps, and that's why you can see Google Maps inside of Uber, because they both become seamlessly interoperable. And so when we talk about unifying sort of Bitcoin and the rest of the crypto ecosystem, it's through that interoperability that the operating system provides. And sort of when people hear that's sort of like the part that they think is a bridge, and in a way it does provide sort of some of the same functions as bridging, but there's no trusted third party, and the scope of the project overall is much broader than that.
Okay, so I suppose to try and give simple examples for people, I have Bitcoin and I want to, can I take out a loan against that? Can I use that as collateral, say within the Cardano ecosystem? Can things like that be done? And to me, the UI UX is going to be so important on things like this. How simple can that process be?
Yeah, so probably the absolute most simple way this can happen, and the way it will likely happen initially, is you'll have a lending platform on Cardano, and someone can come with their Bitcoin and they can shoot their Bitcoin over to Cardano, have a token representing the BTC on Cardano. And when this happens, basically a smart contract on Bitcoin locks up the Bitcoin, shoots over the proof to Cardano. You put your Bitcoin into a smart contract and you borrow against it. And when you pay back that loan, you get back your Bitcoin. And now you can have a proof. You basically sort of destroy that token on Cardano and prove that you've done that. And then you hand that proof over to Bitcoin and you get back your Bitcoin. So that's the simplest way it can work. But you can have more sophisticated ways which might have better UX ultimately, where you actually have the lending contract on Cardano, but the BTC sort of gets locked up on Bitcoin in the same way, but there's sort of no new token issued on Cardano, and the stable coin that you're borrowing is also issued programmatically, or is comes out of a vault programmatically based on instructions it receives from Cardano on Bitcoin. And so all of the actual transactional activity and the user's interface is actually on Bitcoin, but the brain is sitting on Cardano.
Okay, yeah, that's, I think that for me, that's where we need to get to, because we need to make it as simple as possible. You can have the best tech in the world, but if you make it complex for people to use, it's just not going to get any mass adoption. Have you been talking to any projects on Cardano yet, or are you at that stage where they can start testing some integrations?
So we've been talking we've been pretty lucky that a lot of different projects in Cardano have reached out to us. Like, I don't know if I should mention names because I'll inevitably forget someone, but some of the first ones that spoke to us were like Fluid Tokens, Maestro, Emergo. Obviously, I think that everyone knows that they've been speaking with us. And so, once we have the integration, then I think this sort of automatically propagates. It becomes available to all these different projects. Now, where we are is, we actually today, for the first time ever, we demonstrated a bridging transaction using BitcoinOS. And we did it to a project that's working to become a Bitcoin rollup called Merlin. So we've built out the bridging tech. It's not production ready yet, but it's ready for testing and integration. And what we're trying to do is work with developers on the Cardano side. So that, and there's actually quite a lot of different projects that are sort of interested in helping with this, to get the other side, the Cardano side, the side deployed on Cardano, so that we have the end-to-end integration.
Okay, yeah, I know you mentioned fluid tokens there. I think Raul has been looking at different aspects of integrating Bitcoin and Cardano for a while now. I've seen different videos he's put out. He's been on the channel here as well, looking at how we can try and unlock some from the Cardano side, trying to unlock some of the Bitcoin liquidity that's there and encourage more people to come in and start using the dApps that are there. So that was the first time today that she had a bridge on a mainnet, was it?
So that was a testnet transaction. We haven't released the bridging transactions because they're obviously more risky. They involve the movement of funds. We haven't released that to mainnet yet, but we've performed it and demonstrated it on testnet.
Okay. And in terms of when you're verifying a proof on Bitcoin, does this make a really big transaction in terms of it'll cost more in fees, or how does that look for the Bitcoin side?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. One of the like a lot of the work that we've put in has been around actually optimizing this process. And we are now able to use snarks, which is a kind of ZK proof, which has a constant size of just 300 bytes. That's smaller than a standard Bitcoin transaction. And then we can add to that a little bit more transaction data so that most transactions that use BOS are actually 1 kilobyte or less in terms of Bitcoin data. Now, those are extremely small transactions. A standard Bitcoin transaction will frequently be bigger than that. And so this is actually a really powerful scaling technology for Bitcoin. Then the second part of that is the verifying, right? So you usually do not need, so you're always verifying these proofs, but usually you don't need to force a verification on chain. You only need to do that when someone is trying to cheat the system. So actually, maybe let me take a step back, right? So what is the security assumption of BitcoinOS? Usually when we think about most systems in crypto, and certainly bridges, the security assumption is what we call an honest majority, right? So at least 50% of the nodes, they need to be honest. Otherwise, the system can steal your funds and you will lose your funds. And usually what happens is you create these federations with a limited number of participants, like an operator of a bridge. There's going to be like, I don't know, 10 or 20 of them, and you need 11 of those 20 to be honest or not to be hacked or not to have an exploit. BitcoinOS, because it's utilizing ZK verification, has a totally different trust assumption. Our trust assumption is what we call an honest singleton instead of an honest majority, or 1 of n. In other words, so long as there is a single honest participant in the system maintains its security. It maintains its cryptographic security. So even if all of the countries in the world decided to attack the system and there was one sort of lonely neckbeard sitting in a basement somewhere who was acting honestly, the system actually would defeat all of these nation state attackers. That's really, really cool trust assumption. And the other cool thing about it is that we don't have a limited, we're working actually towards removing the limitation of the n. So right now in the version that we've open sourced, there's a limited number of n, but we're now planning to introduce the next version, which will mean that there's no limitation. So basically anyone can verify. Okay, so if out of the entire world, there is one honest participant who's verifying these proofs, then the system can't be cheated. And so for that reason, you basically will never see anyone try to cheat because it's incredibly expensive to try to cheat. But if someone did try to cheat, then there's the question of the footprint of transactions required in order to prove that they tried to cheat. And we're actually getting that smaller and smaller and smaller all the time. And we expect to be able to actually eliminate it. So you get like single shot verification when you actually post the proof.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to hear, because sometimes the worry is that there's the downsides is you make transactions too big, there's extra costs, and it kind of downplays the advantage of being able to use it. But in terms of, I don't know if you call them validators or what you call them in your network, but can anybody be a part of that, or why would someone be a part of it if it only takes one honest actor to actually verify them?
Yeah, so what we need to make sure is that there's going to be a situation probably where years go by and there's almost none or maybe never an attempt to cheat the system. Just as an example, Arbitrum, which is a roll-up that kind of uses a similar technology to roll up to Ethereum has been around for 4 years, and there's been one fraudulent or equivocating situation. In other words, there's been one case, only one in 4 years. Now, this is actually a problem. Why is it a problem? Because if you have long stretches of time where nothing goes wrong, then the incentive to constantly be verifying and validating is reduced. And you need to make sure that that never happens. You need to make sure that there is always sort of like a highly competitive market out there for people who are trying to verify these transactions, verify the proofs that are being posted to Bitcoin. And so, today, there was like a lot of FUD around BitcoinOS. Like, why can't you just use ADA and BTC? Why is there a BOS token at all? And one of the reasons is because what we can do with BOS token is we can incentivize that competitive market for who's going to validate the proofs, to make sure that even if the system works perfectly for many, many years, it has the liveness and the reliability that that there's always a large number of people who are trying to validate the proofs and are incentivized, to be honest.
Okay, and we'll get onto the token now in a minute. That was definitely a hot topic today. But just on the validators, then, so on Cardano we have 2,000, probably 3,000 node operators within the ecosystem. Could every one of them or a percentage of them spin up the software to validate transaction or to validate proofs for Bitcoin OS, or would this be a heavy process?
No. If we do this properly, and we've been talking to people at Murgo and people at IOG, we will be able to simply use a light client. And so what that will mean is that we actually won't rely on the Ethereum, the Cardano validators directly. We will just need to rely on consensus, right? So this will just be a kind of a smart contract. Now, who will need to be using that light client? The light client will be needed by the operators who sit between these two worlds, right? So you got Bitcoin and you've got Cardano, and they're sort of like the space in between. And there you have the operators who need to be doing the proving, who need to be doing the verifying, potentially need to be providing liquidity. They will need to be running a node, and that node will have embedded in it a light client node to Cardano, which will allow them to sort of securely observe Cardano.
Okay, I'm just thinking from my side, like I'm one operator in Cardano, but I have at least 10 servers, more than 10 servers running different operations for different nodes, relays, different projects within the ecosystem. So if there's something that I can add on to them servers, then and I can let it run easily, that I might potentially earn something extra. There's a good incentive there to do that for myself and for lots of other people, that hopefully adds to the security of what you're doing then as well. But I suppose,
Yeah,
how
I think that's
did
a great idea. Like, we could integrate, so all of them, you and anyone else who wants to be, could be an operator, like a node to BitcoinOS as well.
yeah, and look, it's not something I would run on the server with the Cardano node, but in terms of relays and they've just security wise, I'd be always cautious of that. But you could run it on relays and everything like that that aren't just as important. But to take a step back, was Cardano part of the vision, or where did Bitcoin OS, and were you looking at other chains in particular to start, or how did Cardano fit into it?
The original vision, I suppose, was that we were going to build our own rollup. And we started building the technology to make that possible around 4 years ago. And so one of the other, so BitcoinOS has sort of emerged from the work of a number of different projects. And one of the most significant projects is a project called Sovereign, which is a project I contribute to, and sort of pioneered Bitcoin DeFi, launched the first Bitcoin DeFi project that got to scale, and built a very, very big community and to this day continues to constantly innovate. Really a phenomenal project. One of the things that has been cooking in the sovereign ecosystem is this idea of building out a roll-up, building out the ability to verify ZK proofs in Bitcoin to make that possible. And as we realized that we were figuring out how to make that work, we realized also that at the same time, more than 100 different projects had sprung up which were looking to become Bitcoin rollups. Various types of Bitcoin layer 2s that want to be Bitcoin rollups. Like there's like 100 of them. That's a huge market. And so that we thought that would be the market that we would be going after. And then we announced at Bitcoin Nashville the fact that we'd verified for the first time ever ZK proof on Bitcoin mainnet. And people started talking to us, but it wasn't only Bitcoin rollup projects. It wasn't only Bitcoin DeFi projects. It was also Ethereum layer 2 projects that were thinking, wait, maybe we can become a Bitcoin layer 2. And it was also sort of like bridge projects. And it was also layer 1 projects like Cardano. And so, Cardano hadn't been on my radar in that respect at all. I've learned a lot about Cardano over the last month. And in particular, I've learned most of what I learned today. But yeah, we were, as I started to sort of, it was really cool because the Cardano community really surprised me. It's a project that has been around for a really long time. It seems to have a really long-term vision, like Bitcoin, like what we're building. It is UTXO based. It is the largest UTXO smart contract platform in the world. It has a lot of devs because they have an understanding of UTXO who have an understanding of Bitcoin. Like it almost like is the perfect community. It fits hand in glove. And so I think while we didn't initially recognize it, Cardano is an incredibly powerful match for Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think, and just on the ZK stuff as well, that's going to be very powerful. You mentioned earlier that it can be very powerful for scaling Bitcoin. I've seen a lot more interest turning towards that within the Cardano ecosystem. There's some extremely smart people are looking at that. Actually, I think it's the first ZK proof on Cardano was today as well. IOG, was it yesterday or today? Maybe late
Yeah,
last night.
I think,
IO posted.
yeah.
So they said Halo 2. I've only started to really look into ZK and everything like that in the last few months. So I still don't understand all the nuances and differences, but I think there's definitely good synergies there. But coming back to, I suppose, the controversy today, or if we call it that, was the token. So honestly, I hadn't heard there was a token with the project. I hadn't looked to see. It didn't kind of occur to me when I started looking afterwards. This is a discussion that's been ongoing for months. So it's not something that was hidden, that it just wasn't put out there. But the token, we talked briefly about it. Where does it fit? And then we'll get into a bit more about it.
Yeah. So a few things on that. First of all, we've been talking about the token for a really long time. It's just it's sort of it never really rose to the surface as an issue, which I think is unsurprising. I mean, most projects have a token. The last time we posted on about it on Twitter was November 4th, and it was totally ignored. And then we've been talking about it ever since. In fact, even when we were having some like initial conversations with people in the Cardano space, we were discussing maybe doing some kind of launch or something together. So I don't know exactly what it was about the tweets that went out today. Maybe it was the fact that we were letting people sort of register for their interest in the token and to sort of get whitelisted. But that tweet got a lot of attention. Now, in terms of sort of like the reason to have a token in the first place, I think there's two things here. I'll get into the utility of the token in a moment, but I think there's also a bigger story, which is there is this thing where the Bitcoin community for the longest time has been rejecting tokens and rejecting the potential to incentivize innovation and incentivize projects through that, which I think has really limited the growth of a Bitcoin native economy. And I think a lot of the people in the Cardano community, this has been my impression, had the feeling that it also sort of, they've constantly been under attack by sort of Bitcoin maxis. And so one of the things that I want to do is I want to try and break that. I sort of, jokingly said a few months ago that I want to, bring shitcoins to Bitcoin on an industrial scale, because I really think that Bitcoin is the world's best ledger, and free markets are the best incentive structure, and we should create a robust free market with all of the messiness that is involved. Okay, so that I think in terms of why I think it's really good to have a Bitcoin-based token, right, which is what BOS would be, I think that's a really good reason. Now, in terms of why the BitcoinOS operating system would have a token, it's so I posted sort of a longer talk on this today. But basically, the challenge that you have is that because you're passing these proofs and you're sort of creating these little smart contracts, and you're creating not just one, but many, many bridges. There's not just going to be one bridge to Cardano. There's going to be, I don't know, hundreds maybe. And then there's going to be many more bridges to other chains, and they're all going to interact. If you don't have some kind of system which incentivizes the operators to be looking at all of these, which incentivizes validators to be verifying across all of these, which incentivizes market makers to be making markets across all of these, and incentivizes the ability for these operators to interoperate so that funds can move between different UTXOs, different bridge UTXOs, then what you have is you have a system that it fragments into many, many itty-bitty little pieces. And that will work. You can use that. Like if you, Paul, decided you want to build the Paul bridge, and you take the BitcoinOS technology and you plug it in, and you have your own Paul bridge, and maybe you bring a bunch of your friends, that will work, and you don't need the token at all. Where the token becomes important and necessary is when you want to be able to provide a service level agreement in a decentralized way across the entire ecosystem, where you need to incentivize basically the unity of the ecosystem. And if you don't do that, you end up with a situation like with what Ethereum has, where it's got all of these different layer twos, these different rollups, and they're just breaking the composability, breaking the interoperability of the chain. And ultimately, this has really, really hurt Ethereum. And so basically, we're building a machine which is designed as BitcoinOS, that when you use it, Bitcoin feels like a single cohesive ecosystem.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose just to come back for the Cardano ecosystem, I've been involved for a good few years now within the community, and I think everybody's always kind of just defensive because we've seen too many projects coming in the past, just extracting value and then moving on to something else and using the community just to raise funds. So I think that's why there is always, I suppose, skepticism towards people doing token sales, but the token sale won't actually be on Cardano, is it? There was also talk of it being an ERC20 token. Is it, what type of token will it be? You mentioned there Bitcoin.
Yeah, I don't know where the whole ERC20 thing came from. One of the things that we're building as part of BitcoinOS in order to make Bitcoin this fully fledged system is programmable tokens, a standard for programmable tokens, and so the goal would be to have the token as one of that, as that standard. Maybe the first token of that standard will be BOS. Now, that might not work out, right? It might be that standard takes a bit longer to build and we have to figure out some other proxy. It might be that we would sort of like use an ERC20 type standard, but on Bitcoin. We've even considered what would it look like if we launched it on Cardano, right? Those are all possibilities. Ultimately, we want the canonical ledger for it, where it ends up sort of living long term to be on Bitcoin.
Okay. Yeah, I think the whole UTXO thing, and then there was ERC20 thrown into the mix, and there was questions around that too. So everything gains legs when it's just a comment on Twitter, and then it becomes fact at times. But How is the token sale going to happen, or is there fundraisers outside of that? I suppose what you're doing, there's a lot of work gone into it. Is the project been funded to date, or is the token sale to take it further?
Yeah, so we don't have a final tokenomics, and we're still figuring out what the best way to do this is. Mostly, we've been self-funding the project up until now, and our goal here is what we would ideally like to do is sort of sell the tokens in a way similar to sort of the way that they used to get sold in 2016 or 2017, which is, basically get the majority of the tokens sold, so that at a relatively low price, right? Not like okay, we've taken billions of dollars from VCs, so now we have to launch at a really, really high price, and make this something which is owned by the potential users, by the potential community, and not have to go through the whole VC process, which has become the way that most projects do this. And one of the reasons that this has happened, one of the reasons that sort of crypto has become has started to feel like Wall Street, right? So there's all the VCs, they get in, and then eventually there's an IPO, which leaves relatively little for other people to purchase. And then what's worse is there's these constant unlocks, and it becomes impossible to know sort of, or to predict how many tokens are actually being held versus how many are just locked up. One of the reasons that happened was because of regulatory challenges, right? No one wanted to launch their own token. It was easier to go to VCs because VCs, are allowed according to the SEC to buy tokens, but you're not.
Yeah.
And so, how are we getting around this? Well, Sovereign is an incredible decentralized ecosystem with an incredible decentralized governance system. And so, by having a bunch of different projects all working on this together, different companies, different DAOs, and having Sovereign actually be the project which would ultimately perform any sale that was to happen, we can avoid having that an initial moment where the project is centralized. And so we can basically be decentralized before day one, from day -1 or day 0. And so that is the goal. The goal is to try, if we can, to make it possible for anyone who's excited and interested in the project to take part in the project and be part of the journey of the project. I don't know if we'll succeed, but yeah. So that's the goal. The goal is really what I would like to do is I would like to bring back ICOs. I'd like to bring back that period, even though it had a whole bunch of craziness and Ponzi-nomics and nonsense in it. I think it created just so much value. It created Cardano. It created Solana. Well, Solana a little bit less, but it created BNB. It created Ethereum. It created Chainlink. If you think about all the money that was lost to shenanigans versus all the money that was created and all the value that was created, the value created far outstrips it. And so, and it was a period of incredible innovation and a period of incredible excitement and a period of a true free market. And I would like to see that come back on Bitcoin 100 times the size.
Yeah, I remember the 2016, 2017 crazy times of ICOs. That was kind of around when I started getting into crypto a lot deeper. But we're kind of like that on Cardano. Not a lot of VCs get involved in Cardano projects and putting funds into them, especially early on. So it is more like that within Cardano. That'd be the thing that we'd be more familiar with than other chains where you get huge lumps of VC and then you might only get 5% of the tokens being sold to the public. We have the opposite where there might be 50%, 60% sold to the public. There's one other thing as well with, I don't know if you've come across the term partner chains yet with Cardano. There's potential there that might link back with what we said earlier about getting Cardano stake pool operators to run part of the validating network, and then the full details of it aren't out yet, but basically some of the tokens go back to the delegators of the stake pool operators. So there's a way there to distribute the token, involves the Cardano community even more, and gets more validators for the network, but that's something for a different day. But
I've heard about a bunch of partner chains that potentially would be really useful in a Bitcoin context and are interested in integrating BOS. We ourselves will not be launching any chain, not a partner chain or anything else like it. But I think there's partner chains out there that are looking to integrate BOS and sort of become more specialized in Bitcoin DeFi.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Good to hear. In terms of timelines, then, if I was looking to be able to utilize this on Cardano, utilize the technology to be able to use my Bitcoin on Cardano, is there any rough timelines on that?
We're looking to get it out during Q1, towards end of February, March. A lot depends on the complexity and the speed with which we're able to find partners in Cardano who can help the Cardano side of the integration. But from the perspective of our technology, it's mostly ready. We're now getting it ready to be audited. And then it's just a question of integrating it.
Okay, and in terms of other chains, where does Cardano sit in terms of being some of the first ones to get in there is going to be a good thing because they can then start to get the name of offering the DeFi capabilities to Bitcoin. But what about other chains and timelines that they're on? Are there any that are the front runners? I suppose the roll up that we already mentioned that she had the proof out on today.
So there's a bunch of Bitcoin rollups and Bitcoin layer 2s. There are other projects, sort of Ethereum layer 2s that are looking into this. There are actually quite a lot of projects that are building on BOS. And I think one of the advantages as time goes by of building on BOS is that you then become interoperable with all of these other systems. I can't speak to those which haven't already sort of come out and said that they're building on BOS, but there's a lot of activity.
Okay. And final one for me for today then is just we have bridges out there already. What will be the primary difference of what you're offering compared to other bridges? Like within Cardano, one chain will be one of the more popular ones. There's Rosen Bridge as well. What will be the differentiator for BitcoinOS?
So BitcoinOS sort of provides bridging-like functionality as just a small part of BitcoinOS. And even that bridging-like activity is something that Bitcoiners are much more, people who hold BTC, even you, Paul, are much more likely to be willing to use a system where there's no trusted third parties who you need to trust with your Bitcoin, which is basically the case with every single bridge out there. But going back to the beginning of the conversation that we were having, like the fact that you can introduce private transactions for Bitcoin, the fact that you can create programmable tokens on Bitcoin, the fact that you could create a token that travels around different chains, always secured by Bitcoin, always pointing back to a token on the Bitcoin ledger. There's a lot of sort of new space that is opening up to us, the new design space that is opening up to us. And it's very difficult to predict exactly what the key use cases will be. But I can hazard a guess at two things, right? One is, for all of the history of crypto up until now, right, not including Bitcoin, crypto has mostly been stuck in gambling, in casinos, in sort of speculation, right? And the question is why? And I think a big reason for it is that the systems that we've had have been software systems, not Bitcoin, which is permanent. I call it permaware, right? It's not like software. It's more like hardware. It doesn't change. It's extremely minimalistic. It's extremely reliable. But Ethereum is much more like software, constantly changes, constantly needs to update. You don't know if it's going to be around in 10 years or what it would look like if it were, right? And so if you're building, if you want to do real financial activity, almost any financial activity is going to be for many, many years, for many decades. A company could be around for 80 years. Where is stock going to trade? What kind of ledger is it going to need? Savings accounts last for a lifetime. Inheritance is generations. Mortgages are 30 years. Bonds are 35 years, etc., etc. And so you're not going to use a system that's lifespan is shorter than the asset you're trying to deal with. And that is one of the reasons that Bitcoin has proven so powerful, so interesting to sort of traditional, institutional, large-scale finance in a way that nothing else has. And so by building more things on Bitcoin, we can actually escape this little cell that we've been trapped in on the crypto side, on the DeFi side, of just doing speculative casino-like things, because we can finally start offering sort of crypto programmable money services, but to assets that are built on Bitcoin, including BTC, and therefore are on, can have extremely long time horizons. So I think we see a massive explosion, in just the amount of value that can come into not just crypto, but DeFi specifically. The second thing is, I think we'll start to see that chains that are not well designed for a world in which Bitcoin plays such an important role begin to struggle to find themselves in this world, right? And I think Ethereum is sort of like the classic example. It's really built this massive, thick chain which does so many different things and is now sort of coming apart at the seams and struggling to find a narrative. Whereas Cardano is well positioned to integrate into Bitcoin and sort of provide services, right, on like programmable services to the entire ecosystem and specifically to Bitcoin. And so I think we're going to see a shift in the narratives and in the kinds of projects that sort of are winners in the next phase of crypto.
Okay, yeah, I suppose myself, I'd be included in a lot of what you said there in terms of I hold Bitcoin, I hold assets on other chains too, but I've only ever used basically test transactions on different bridges to check them out, see how they all work. But I've never fully trusted, or I've never seen enough of opportunity on the other side to trust my assets into what we call a standard bridge, I suppose. But maybe if the opportunities are there that I can utilize some of the Bitcoin I have for more leverage within Cardano DeFi, then that could be something hopefully early next year I'll be able to look at through yourselves. But Yago, thanks very much for your time today. I do appreciate it. Hopefully it has given people more insights into what you guys are building, a bit more insights into the token. If people have questions, do leave them in the comment section down below. I'll answer as many as I can. I'll put them back to Yago. Maybe if there's enough, we'll do a follow-up session at some point to go through them. I know you'll be doing lots of Twitter spaces, different podcasts around the place over the next few weeks anyway. And where's the best place for people to follow to keep up to date on this?
Well, to follow me, I suppose it's Edan Yago on Twitter, so at Edan Yago. There's also at BTC_OS. And then there's the website, BitcoinOS.build.
Yeah, I'll put all of them links down in the comment section. And as I see updates coming out, you can be sure I'll include them in videos here. Thanks everyone for watching. Do appreciate it. Please do share it out. Let people know what's going on. Subscribe if you're new. Give the video a like. And I will talk to you soon. There you go. Thanks once again.
Thanks very much, Paul.